Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Classic Horrors Club podcast companion. We've been absent for a month in this format. However, Richard and I have both been very busy on our blogs and on the podcast itself.
We've got a great double feature to get us back on track.
Yes, not only the double feature of me, Jeff Owens from ClassicHorrors.club, and
I'm Richard Chamberlain from MonsterMovieKid.wordpress.com.
Do you like the way I squeezed in our introduction?
You did.
Forget.
I'm like, oh, we're doing it now. Okay,
yes.
Awesome.
But the real double feature are two Paul Naschy films. We did a Naschy November 2 years ago, I think, where we talked about a couple. Well, we were probably doing 3 movies at that time, but more about the life and career of Paul Naschy. This one is more focused on 2 specific movies. Rich, you want to tell everyone what they are?
Yes, the first one we're doing is the Werewolf versus God bless. The Werewolf versus the Vampire Woman from 1971. Leave that edit in. We'll just do raw cut. Yep. And then the second movie is Inquisition, filmed in 1976, maybe released in 1977, probably released in 1978.
Yes, that's why Richard is standing in front of a full moon. He is about to transform into Wolfman, or the werewolf of Valdemar Daninsky, and I am in 1600s France during the Inquisition, about to be strapped in front of this wheel that has a nice blade, and as it comes closer and closer to my chest, it's going to tear my sweatshirt.
And then your nice big hairy barrel chest will be out there.
Yes, we'll probably focus a little more heavily on Inquisition. We don't normally include guests when we do the companion. We did have a guest, though, and let's give him a plug. Mr. Stephen D. Sullivan, author, who has an interesting Naschy project, actually, that he's working on that he tells us all about in the audio podcast. So be sure to tune in to that.
Yeah, I hope that everything with that project comes together, because that could be also something very fun for Halloween of next year.
So sit back, enjoy, see some good clips from some great movies. When you're done with that, if you haven't already listened to the audio podcast, head over to SoundCloud or one of our blogs and listen to that. Anyway, we can have you. We love to have you and appreciate you participating and listening.
Absolutely.
Talk about some of the monster action.
Yes.
I think Naschy's werewolf, I don't know about always, but many times looks very different, even totally different type of makeup. One common thing is he drools like a running faucet. Sometimes it's bloody after a kill, but first transition scene we see, there's that drool coming out of his mouth. I think this has probably the best at the end transition scene I've seen when he returns to his human form. Those dissolves where it's really just spots laid over and he goes from wolf to human, but he does not bat an eyelash. I mean, he is still, and I think it was a terrific effect. I also really like, now going to the vampire side, the slow motion. Done that before in other movies, but it never looks realistic to me because there are features of the composition of the scenes that kind of work against the slow motion. Here, there's nothing. It's just that. So it seems very spooky and eerie.
Apparently, the Spanish people at the time were very centered in reality. The concept of a werewolf being in Spain was something that, well, of course that's not going to happen. We don't have them here in Spain. Werewolves aren't real. So if you're going to do a werewolf, you've got to put it in another country. And so that's why the movie is set in France. That's a fascist rule that imposed that. But it became so much of who they were that the fact that these movies even got made was in some ways a miracle, because they were, yes, they were setting these characters in all these other countries, but they were doing things in these movies that in the day-to-day real world they couldn't do. The blood and gore, the nudity. Yeah, that's just not part of what we're doing.
See the werewolf versus the vampire woman.
These are 2 of my favorite Naschy films out of all the Naschy films that I've seen, and I thoroughly enjoyed Inquisition.
Was this your first time, or had you seen it before?
First time.
Okay. This was my second time. However, Inquisition was the very first Paul Naschy film I watched on that fateful day, October 15th, 2017. This was a good one to be first because it got me into him. This was probably coming out of his most prolific. I mean, in 1973, he made, what, a dozen movies? It's a turning point, sort of. It's the first time he directed a film, right?
It is, yes.
Part historical drama, but with a Naschy flair, there's no doubt it's horror. Comes in the wake of movies like Witchfinder General, Mark of the Devil, The Bloody Judge, The Devils, this whole religious horror type of film.
This one takes a different look because we always hear about
nobody expects the Spanish Inquisition.
You're not getting the Spanish Inquisition of this one. You're getting the French Inquisition, which, I'll be honest, I think I'd heard, that there obviously was multiple Inquisitions going on. So the Spanish Inquisition has a better PR department because you hear about that a lot more. And of course, there's a reason why we're talking about the French Inquisition, because this movie was made in Spain and nothing bad ever happens in Spain. We never had an Inquisition, but France did, and they were horrible.
I read in Troy Howarth's book that Naschy was going to do the Spanish Inquisition, but then he was having a conversation with someone, and they said, oh, no, the French is much more colorful.
It's a movie that's, I felt cohesive, which sometimes Naschy films, there can be a struggle. And that's a European film thing, not just Naschy. Sometimes Euro films in general, Euro horror films, can be a bit chaotic. They can be a series of events that just kind of scenes and stuff that kind of get thrown together, and you're oftentimes wondering, how did we get from point A to point D? What happened to B and C? We were talking about it, but we didn't see it. And, oh, there's a random breast there to take us off the fact. Shiny object. Yes, we have some plot deficiencies, but here's some nudity for you. And here's some gore. Are you enjoying it? Yeah, well, yeah, you end up enjoying it. But then by the end of it, you're sitting there thinking, what did I just watch? I'm not sure what I watched. There's things that should be there but weren't there, and things that popped up that I have no clue why they were there, but they looked cool, so I'm going to go with it.
Yeah, and when I said it was a turning point, I also meant to say that I think, except maybe for El Comandante, which comes a couple years later, this really might have been his creative peak. At least of the ones I've seen, I don't think very many of them at all past this point have the, I don't want to say quality, but the effect, the magic maybe, that most of his films up to this point do.